Hey everybody, this is Andre here with the Kevin Breeze channel, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Cricket Icon 2. So let's get started. This phone has a 6-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 268, and an aspect ratio of 18:9. We got the front-facing camera right here on the bezel, and this camera is 5 megapixels. Right now, I do have the brightness at 100%, and I'd say the display looks pretty decent. Overall, it is a pretty good size. It's not huge, but it's definitely not small either. It's going to give you a pretty good experience for content consumption. Whether you're watching videos, viewing photos, even reading, you're going to be able to see details and all that pretty well. But at the same time, the phone's not so big to the point where it's uncomfortable to hold or carry in your pocket. Even though the top and bottom bezels are a little bit on the thicker side, I do like the design of the phone. It's not too obnoxious, it doesn't look very clunky or anything, and it's decently thin too. The back is made of a plastic material that really doesn't pick up fingerprints, and it has an interesting texture. As far as the materials go, they're definitely not the best quality. They do feel a little bit cheap. So if you're expecting to get a really premium feel from this phone, you're probably going to be disappointed. But at the same time, it does feel decently durable. Now for the storage, this phone is getting 16 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion. Now 16 gigabytes is really not that much. For the average user, you're probably gonna have to be careful in order to avoid running out of space. You're gonna be able to put a decent amount of apps on here, but if you're doing any kind of activities that take up a decent amount of space, you're probably gonna run out. If you have lots of photos and videos, you can put those on a microSD card. But as far as apps and app data and all that, you are going to be a little bit limited. This phone's really made mostly for basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, some light web browsing and social media use, and that sort of thing. Now, the one good thing about this phone as far as storage goes is it actually has the Go version of Android 10, which is a condensed version made for phones that have smaller storage space. So usually the system is taking up anywhere between 8 and 15 gigabytes of space, sometimes even more depending on the device. But with Android 10 Go, this phone only has 4.3 gigabytes of system data that's taking up space. So that leaves you with 40% of the data being used. In addition to that, I do have a few apps that you might use on a daily basis downloaded onto the phone. Not a whole lot, but you can see here what we're working with. You have just under 10 gigabytes of space to work with. So to give you an idea of what you might be doing, if you have a larger app like a game, that's going to take up well over a gigabyte of space. In a decently long 1080p video, say maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, is going to take up close to a gigabyte of space as well. And then photos, of course, you can fit a decent amount of photos on this phone. You can also fit photos and videos on a micro SD card. So the bottom line is, if you're going to be doing just basic activities on the phone, like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web, that sort of thing, you're going to be completely fine. But once you start downloading lots of apps or storing lots of photos and videos on the phone, that's where you're really going to start running out of space. I would say for the average user, you probably are going to want a little bit more space, like 32 gigabytes. But if you're only going to be doing basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web, and that sort of thing, then thanks to the Android 10 Go software freeing things up a little bit, the storage on this phone should be fine for you. Now this phone has no fingerprint scanner or face unlock, and unfortunately it also doesn't support wireless charging. So for security, you're gonna have to use a PIN or a pattern or a password if you really want to increase the security. Now I personally really don't like having to put in a PIN or something like that. I like being able to put my finger on the phone or use a face unlock and have it unlock right away. It's super inconvenient to have to type anything, but on the bright side, this keypad is really big, so it's not too bad to use. Now taking a look at the rear camera setup, we have only one camera here that's 5 megapixels. If taking photos is something you're going to be doing a lot of, you're probably going to be disappointed with this phone. It also does not have portrait mode. It's a really basic featureless camera. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to give you some photo and video samples from this phone.
Now, as Andre mentioned, the camera quality definitely does leave quite a bit to be desired, but on the other hand, it's about as good as you'd expect from a phone in this price range. Now, if you're going to be using this phone's camera for very casual things, such as Snapchat, where maybe the quality isn't quite as important, or if you just want to send a quick picture to a friend and it doesn't really need to be high quality, then this should be fine. But on the other hand, if you're somebody that constantly likes to take photos and videos to post on social media, for example, then you probably will be disappointed with the camera quality from this phone. Now again, I don't necessarily see it as being a deal breaker, but on the other hand, I wouldn't buy this phone expecting to get really incredible camera quality. But let's now take a look at some video samples. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with a front-facing test video from the Cricut Icon 2. Definitely curious to know what you think about both the video quality and audio quality from the video itself. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with a 1080p test video from the main camera on the Cricut Icon 2. It is pretty bright out today, pretty much in the middle of the day. Overall, this device doesn't really have too much focusing abilities on closer up objects, so keep that in mind.
So internally, the Cricut Icon 2 is getting 1 GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio A22 processor. We ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 125 and a multi-core score of 244. So this is really not a very powerful phone. It's going to be fine for your basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, a little bit of light web browsing, and some social media use, depending on the app you're going on. But if you're doing anything else that's more high performance, like photo and video editing or playing games, then you're probably going to be disappointed because this processor is going to struggle a lot with that kind of thing. Even if you're doing a lot of multitasking, since this phone only has 1 GB of RAM, it's probably going to have some trouble. As far as the battery goes, this phone has a 3400 mAh battery, so it's pretty mediocre, not nearly the best, but you can also get a lot worse. The iPhone 12, for example, has a 2815 mAh battery, which is a lot worse than 3400. So you're still going to be able to get decent charge out of this, but if you're looking for a super large battery where you can get a ton of life per charge and lots of longevity, maybe you like to get one phone and hold on to it for years without the battery or anything wearing out, then you might want to look at another device because even though this phone's battery is decent, it's nowhere near the best. Now that we've gone over some of the specs of the phone, let's take a closer look at the hardware. On the top of the phone, we have a 3.5mm headphone jack and a noise cancelling microphone. On the bottom, there's a USB-C charging port in the microphone. There's nothing here on the left side. And on the right, we have our volume keys and our power button. On the back, we have the camera setup, the flash, and down here is the speaker. There's also a Cricut logo right above the speaker. Now, in conclusion, is this phone worth buying in 2021? This phone is really basic and featureless. There's not a whole lot to it, but at the same time, it's one of the most inexpensive phones I've ever seen. So honestly, if you're only gonna use a phone for basic activities like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web, and maybe doing some light social media, then for what it costs, this phone actually provides a lot of value. And I would say it's definitely worth it. But if you're looking for a phone that can do pretty much anything else, if you like to take good photos, if you're playing games, editing photos or videos, anything that really requires a decent amount of processing power, then you should probably look at other devices. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.